Simon, thank you so much for joining me today. Can you give us a little intro into what you do and who you are?
Okay, so I'm Simon Lyon. I'm a musician first and foremost, just like yourself. Um, and I'm a qualified teacher. I'm a producer and an Ableton certified trainer. And I also work for Ableton in the UK as a brand manager for UK and Ireland.
Fantastic. So you're in quite a unique position, really, and we're going to be able to go off on some really interesting angles of linking up your experiences as a musician and working with Ableton and being a teacher, and we're going to mash it all up into a fascinating mix. Um, However, I think people who are listening to this really need to understand what Ableton is, because obviously that's going to
Ah,
be a
okay.
focus of what we're talking about. So,
Oh,
from you, a summary of what Ableton is.
summary. Okay, so Ableton is a Berlin based software company, and their main product is a digital audio workstation, a DAW, some music software called Live. So Ableton Live is like the core product, and from that we have um, a push instrument, and we have some a learning music website. But most of it is based from the software, and I'm an Ableton certified trainer, so I've used the software for some time, many years now. I don't know, 10, 15. Time flies when you're having fun. And I use it exclusively for making music. And that's from initial ideas, creation, even through to live performance. And I've used it for over the years to help other people. I've used it in teaching situations. I've used it to help bands go from the studio to the stage to help aid performances. So it's like flexible music software that aids so many areas of creation and performance. So, and it's based in Berlin, and we have um, divisions over the all across the world, and we have hundreds of employees from lots of different countries, and but they're nearly all music makers.
Wonderful. Now, the idea of it being a DAW, which stands for Digital Audio Workstation, correct?
Yeah,
Good. So, but in some ways, I feel, and I'm not implying that you're trying to mislead us, but in some ways, it almost feels misleading that Ableton Live is a DAW, because it's when I think of a DAW, I think of what I record guitar tracks into, or in fact, what I might be recording this podcast on. Something that is its main function is just to sort of capture audio.
yeah,
Whereas, what I really want listeners to understand who don't use Live already is to understand that it's kind of an instrument in itself, isn't it? It's more of
yeah,
it's had an integral part to play in the musical landscape that we listen to, which
yes,
hopefully we'll talk about in a bit.
yeah.
But could maybe you just sort of demonstrate, Simon, that kind of element of it that makes
Okay.
it different from being a
Yeah.
door?
So yeah, so the main way, and to try and describe this to people who are listening but not seeing. So I believe you're going to show some of the this what we're
Yes,
doing now.
yeah, absolutely.
So for those who can't see what we're doing, if you imagine four vertical lines and four horizontal lines side by side, that's the Ableton logo, and it represents two distinct work areas of the software. So let's
Wow,
go.
I didn't realize that. That's
There you go. You see.
fantastic.
So
Okay.
yeah. So I mean, if I go onto here and you see the logo at the bottom of my screen there, they're the four
Right.
vertical lines, four horizontal. So that's our logo. And if you look into my top right hand screen, you can see the represented here as well. And let's deal with the four horizontal lines, which is pretty much what you've just described, is a timeline left to right, And this is where you record your instruments, and inevitably where they end up as a song structure, which you can then share with anybody else. So that's the same for most, Cubase, Logic, GarageBand, so on. But where it gets interesting, and which is the more unique element that people have tried to incorporate since, is the for vertical lines. Now I'm using the word for, it's just part of the logo. You can have as many, the lines represent tracks or channels. And in this case, I'm on the what we call session view, and this is where you can jam ideas. So you don't have a fixed time. So it's very flexible for creation and also performance. So I've got this kind of, the screen I'm on now is what we call our session view. So this is the vertical. We have like channels like a mixing desk. And in these channels, you can place clips of sound. Those clips can come in a couple of different ways, but I'm just going to show you. I've got like a loop here. And this is piece of audio that's been pre-recorded. Now you can create your own. I'm not going to do that right now. But if I just click one of these, I can... Is that okay for volume?
Sounds good, yeah.
Okay. So I'm just going to use a little drum break. Now I place this into my one of the tracks, the channels here, and this acts like a mixing desk. But when I trigger or launch this clip, it's going to keep playing until I tell it not to. So I'm just going to fade that down as I'm going to talk over it. And if you imagine that this sound, it can be anything. It can be drums, guitar, bass, your voice, or anything. That's just playing around. Now what I can do is I can search for something that goes with that sound. And I'm going to go for a bass line. So I'm searching for a sound. And the interesting thing here is the current tempo is 100 BPM. And whilst it's playing in real time, I can find another sound, but it will adapt automatically the tempo of that loop. So even if the drum beat is 100 and the bass is 80, it will match them both to 100. So it matches a project tempo. This kind of adds to this flexibility where you can move tempo in real time and just not make any immediate decisions, but feel your way through the music. So I'm just going to go for a bass line. One I know works already. So that's going to work. So I'll drag this in here. So what I've got now is I've got two samples or loops, and I can launch them together by hitting this triangle there, which basically will drop it on the next available bar. So if I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So whilst that's playing, I'm going to search for a guitar loop. That's one down here that I know is going to work. I'm just going to drop this in and again launch it. So what I can do now is bring sounds in and out and choose what I want to hear. And basically I can play around with these sounds. Now these are sounds that have already been recorded and provided with you in Ableton Live to play around with. But some people say, oh, that's just using loops and things like that. There's nothing wrong with loops of music to get you going, especially if you're new to using software. Rather than have to build everything from scratch, we give you some building blocks to, sort of begin to make music. But for example, these are audio clips, so that's recordings, and you can make your own by connecting a microphone or a guitar, which Chris does with his guitar. But what I can do here is I can I can have what's called a Midi channel. A Midi is musical instrument digital interface. So you can actually use a sound, and you can say the musical instrument part is, you can use a MIDI keyboard or piano. You can even use MIDI guitars or drums, but that's the way you're inputting the information, and the digital interface, obviously the computer, is going to turn your notes into computer information. So in this case, it's how high or low a note is, how fast the duration of a note. the pitch. So what I can do here is, for example, this bass sound, which is playing a sequence already. Which is okay, but I may like the sound of the sample or the recording, but I don't like the pattern it's playing. So if I click on this now, what I can do is I can click on a MIDI channel. For those who can't see, I've got an area at the bottom that says drop an instrument or sample here. Now that can be any sound on your computer. You can just drop it here. In this case, it's the bass. And when I let go, it now turns into what we call a simpler, which is a simple sampler. And I can play the notes. And it's something that I showed you, Chris, yeah, that you can just drop any sound in, but then you then play it. So rather me press play and it plays this pattern, I've now got this on my keyboard. So when I arm this channel now, I should be able to play it. 1 second. Oh, I've not got my keyboard switched on. There you go. So you can use, I'm going to use the keyboard of my computer, the middle row. I have got a MIDI keyboard like a piano, but I can just use my laptop here. So this now is just the note. So I could hold it down and the sample will play all the way to the end. But we've already got that. So what I can do now is I can just select one area. So now I've got one note. So I can then play a scale. Or I can play a chord even. So I can effectively reharmonize, redistribute the notes, and just basically chop it up and make something completely new. Now, if you're not confident playing the notes in, what I can do is I'm going to play a drum beat along, drum beat I had before, and I'm going to create a clip. So I'm going to double click on my screen. And then I've got a piano roll. So this is like a visual representation of a piano with the pitches running from low to high. So I can just choose a note. And I can also choose what key I want to play in. So I'm going to choose C minor. Now, the thing to add here, actually, is that the actual note that I sampled, the bass pattern, the actual root note may not have been C. So we've got a little tuner on here. So if I just find out what key it was in, and it's like a guitar tuner, Chris. I don't know if you've used the guitar tuner in live, but it's just over here under.
I don't really worry about being in tune.
No, it's an old-fashioned concept, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
So drag that on there.
Progressive. Yeah.
So I've got I'm just going to check because I want to make sure that anyone who's got perfect pitch out there says that's not a C. So if I play this bass, so you can see there, it's an A, F, C, and B. So I know that the clip's actually in the key of A minor. So, I mean, I think it did actually tell me on there. It did actually give me a clue, A minor. One should read. So it's actually an A. So I'll keep it in the key just to make things easier. So when I click over here, I know that all the white notes of my keys are going to be in A, but I'm going to make it even easier for me. I'm going to select A minor. And then what it does now, it only shows the notes of the scale. You can turn that on and off. In this case, it's just to make it easy. And if someone's new to this and you want to gain confidence with your ideas, sometimes it's good to limit your options because then you can be more creative. So if I play this drum beat now, what I can do is just draw the notes in. I can take my time. I can just draw a line of notes. But just to speed things up, I'm just going to draw the drum beat in. So I'm going to play the drum beat like this. And then I'm just going to create this clip here. Oops, sorry. Move the zoom controls out of the way. There we go. So now A minor, just the notes in the scale. Find the first root note. There we go. So start here. So I'm just going to double click, drag a note, and then play this in real time. So I just drew that in, sorry, with just clicking with my mouse. You could play that in. And one interesting thing as well is that if I don't even press record, this is something that's I use all the time. And I think I showed you this, Chris, as well, that if you've got a keyboard attached, what you can do is use this thing called capture. So if I just start jamming along with an idea like this, I'm just going to play the drums, and I'm just going to press a note. And I think, well, I mean, that wasn't particularly good, but I'm just playing some notes there, but I didn't hit record. But there's a feature called capture, and what it does, it retrospectively records. So if you just arm the channel, which is just basically so you can play, and if you just put your very first idea down and you just start playing along naturally without thinking about recording, you can then go up to the top, and there's this little sort of think of it as a net to capture your notes, and you press this, and basically everything that I did, even though it was terrible, it captured it. So you can go back in time and capture your jam. So you may just start playing and think, oh, that was pretty good, I should have recorded that. And you've got this capture option. Now I find that quite liberating, as a, you know, even as an educator and someone who's composing and producing. It's the red light. As soon as a red light goes on, everyone knows about that. You just mentioned the red light syndrome, so that can really help. But just to, once I've got all these ideas on here, on this is the session view, think of them as like plates spinning. You know, they keep going until you tell them not to. What I can do then is I hit record at the top here, and it will record everything that I do on this screen, where you're jamming and feeling your way through the music, onto the arrangement screen, which is the more traditional way to build a song structure. So I'll just hit record and just show you what I mean by that. I'm stopping all the plates from spinning, and I'm just going to hit record. And so rather than have this preconceived idea of I'm going to have 16 bars or I'm going to have 32 bars, I'm just going to feel my way through it. And then there is so much you can do after that, but I'm just going to give you a little insight. So hit record. Start with the drums, and then the guitar. And I can drop instruments in and out. Now make sure the drums come in on time. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I hit my tab key now, I'm going to move back to the horizontal view, and you can see, if you can see there, it's kind of grayed out because Ableton Live currently thinks that I'm still playing from the other screen, and you need to press this orange button called back to arrangement, which basically tells the program, okay, you want to be in this view now. You press this, and then I can now go through this and edit and chop parts out. If it was too long, the intro, I can just make that easier, start straight away now rather than just with the drum. But that's just the beginning. From there, we can go in many, many different directions.
Thank you. That's a really cool insight into it and a fantastic explanation. Can I give a sort of a summary of what of a way of describing it, and then you tell me if it's completely
No, you
off
go for it. Yeah.
So I think it's an intuitive music creating tool. Was that kind of a?
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, one thing that, you know, there's many hundreds of things I can tell you, but yes, intuitive in many ways. I think like the transferable technology skills such as Command C or Control C, copy and paste and duplicate, all those things, even Control A or Command A, which is like select all text on a Word document, selects all samples or all devices. So intuitive in the way that you'd expect a computer program to work, but intuitive as far as a workflow works. Absolutely, I think that's why it's become so popular.
And I think, and obviously this is a audio based podcast, so people that are listening
Yeah,
need to sort of really be able to visualize the difference
yeah,
between this horizontal and vertical sort of presentation. Because when I say intuitive, what I mean by that as well is that there's there's not a sort of a set way of working. So particularly for the fact
yeah.
that I mean, in my use of it, for example, I don't really spend much time with the horizontal way of working at all. It's all very much based on the vertical layout and working with modules of sound or
Mm.
clips,
Clips.
because it seems more original. It seems less limiting, and I think that's quite a unique part of it. And but let's rewind a little bit of
Okay.
what's sort of happening, because that's a fantastic explanation of what Ableton Live is, which I think is really important for everyone to have, because lots of people listening might have no clue, have never even heard of this, whereas others might.
Mm.
What's your experiences, Simon, in music tech and education sense? Not your CV, but what's your sort of observations that you found, like working in schools, but also working with music teachers. You know, what are your sort of observations in a?
Wow. Yeah, lots. I mean, as part of my role, I now work with lots of teachers. But yeah, when I qualified, I did my. Yeah, you said don't make it a CV thing, so I'm just trying to think. But yeah, I did mine at MMU Manchester, and when I did my PGC secondary, I was one of the only people who was using music tech. Now that will obviously give an idea of how old I am, but it was like Atari STs. Do you remember those?
Wow.
Atari STs and a copy of Cubase back in the day. And I was at music doing the PGC with a lot of string players, people who are from more traditional music backgrounds. And there was kind of always a constant trade off. They would help me with classical theory, and I would help them to try and sequence music to use the technology. So as far as from an education perspective, I think there was a time many years ago where it was like, oh, technology is making its way into education. Whereas I think nowadays it's kind of that's just kind of a given that the young people that we're working with, technology to them is just everyday life. It is not like some kind of new thing to them. They've been born into a world where the internet has already existed and things like that.
Mm.
So accessibility and speed, and for an educator to not understand that, I think, or try and you can't blame, when you always parents or grandparents say, oh, back in my day we didn't have to do that, we didn't have all this stuff. You got to remember, it's not the young people's fault. We made that world that they're in, so we gave them, I call them the McDonald's generation because they want it now, instantly. And why not? That's what they see. So I think as an educator, and I've been into schools as a, as the support for the teacher. I'm not having to do all the other things like the planning and that kind of stuff, which is the hard part too. I think the actual delivering the lessons is the great part of the job, and inspiring young people. But I think to understand how they perceive music is equally as important as um, the way that we sort of go back to the past to say, well, this was great, what this composer did, and this is great, and this is how music's built. But I think as a whole, if we understand the music that they are into and what inspires them and the function of music in their life, whether it be in video games and websites, and then kind of get them on side, then you can kind of really show them and guide them through this massive landscape of music and creativity and performance. So
that's
Is that on the way? Is that on the right sort of thing? You were
man. I mean, that's spot on, and the whole how they, as in how students, how young people perceive music.
hmm.
I'm gonna focus in on that
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
sure, I think there's a lot of wider conversation in
Oh yeah.
sort of arts and youth music work
Right.
around the idea of young people informing what they learn. So
Hmm.
rather than um, the oldies going, well, this is you need this to be able to do music well, like I do. I think generally speaking, there's that kind of shift of, oh well, actually yeah, we need to sort of be a bit more informed so it's more relevant.
Yeah.
But you said how children perceive music,
Hmm.
and actually that's one of the reasons I was so keen to do this podcast and include Ableton Live in that, because the visual representation of
Yeah.
the door is, I think, really fundamental. And also I'm going to do the whole showing my launch pad
Oh
thing
yeah.
as well,
With bass
which
controller.
this is it, and which I'm holding up to the screen now for those who are watching this in a visual way, if indeed we use it in a visual way. But what that is essentially a grid of buttons, and that can link beautifully to Ableton Live, and it also helps reinforce the idea of this scenes, doesn't it? And working with clips, not working in a left to right timeline. Now, there's so much in music education, conversation, and language that is about bars, that is about form, even the sort of endless conversations about different forms of music and these
Mm.
real categories. And actually, the so many of the artists that we're all listening to today who are actually genuinely using this bit of software,
Mm.
which we'll talk about more in a bit, are not thinking in that way at all, and they're working in this sort of visual and modular way and an intuitive sort of way of being. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is something that obviously I put myself in being one of those people that is like, well, given the reason that I started using a computer to make music, it's because I was in a band with people and they would never turn up, and I'd have to pick them up in my car, book a rehearsal, but their motivation was very different than mine. And I wanted to create music, and probably as um, a 16, 17-year-old wanted to be like some kind of mega rock star or something. Still do now, Joe. So it's your mind changes as you grow and stuff like that. But I still write music every day, but I think that live allows you to be in that flow state, which you may have heard of many times, like
Yeah.
comedians and
Let's
actors.
talk about flow state. That's
Oh, you want to talk about flow
yeah.
state?
Let's do
Okay.
it.
So basically, if I am inspired by one sound now, I mean, maybe we could do this another time, but I could. I do like a little video cast that on the Ableton Certified Trainers channel where we talk about the music we make and just creating things, which is something that I'm really into. Which is another whole conversation, I'm sure. But this flow state idea of that you find a sound or some chords that inspire you, and the way that Ableton Live works is you can just keep going and not exactly what you said. There is no bounds to the structure. You are in control of your own musical journey. So if I want to reach out and get a bass sound, if you just saw how easy that was with me talking to you guys over it, imagine when I'm not talking about it. I can just drag a bass sound. Do I like that one? No. Do I like this one? Yes, that's good. Do I want it to repeat semi-quavers? Yes, draw it in. Do I want it to have a Latin groove? I can access my groove pool, put it in, and it will apply a groove that I can control and the intensity of the groove, and I can draw on all these resources so quickly, much faster than if I had to have a musical conversation with someone. Which in an ideal world would still be great if I could just walk into my studio and there's a full band waiting for me, ready to play whatever's in my head.
Mm.
So that's pretty much what I use this software for. And it's this the flow state idea is to, when you do get in that state of creating music, you can stay there. And the idea with this program is you can just reach for the things that you need and not have to go outside of the program to do anything else, whether it be drums or the bass patterns, or everything's that sort of there to help you to get the idea out it's guiding you to do. So I think, to go back to that, the structure thing, it's good to have a destination or an end goal, but whilst you're creating, I think to have no limits is a great thing, as long as you can then come back and say, right, okay, I need to organize this now. But then you can press stop, go back, look at what you've got, and then begin to edit. Whereas maybe before I started using Ableton Live, it was like, I've got an intro, I've got a middle bit, how long does it need to be? Right, next. And then I was basically limited by those structures. But I think to have a balance of both is the ideal. That's what you need. But to have this flexibility where you can literally react and musically react to things, and almost this kind of idea of in an ideal scenario in the future, if somebody many years ago said, what would you like to have? I'd like to be able to stand in front of a system with speakers and say, can I have a guitar from 1960s through a Fender amp, and I'd like John Bonham on drums, and I'd like Jean-Michel Jarre on synthesizer, and this kind of ridiculous idea, but you can theoretically do that now, because
Mm.
you have access to those instruments, and the way that they, because of the music tech, even a guitar, electric guitar is music tech, a microphone is music tech. So it's kind of all this has been used to enable anyone to make music, and just regardless of your upbringing or your accessibility to instruments and things like that. And it's gone both ways as well. Now it's got more complicated, and it's also been simplified via apps and iOS devices and things like that, which is another conversation again. But I think it's accessible a lot more now for people who are creative and who might just want to do it just for fun and not have any ambitions to be a rock star or anything, but artistic expression and things like that.
I feel there's lots of podcasts within podcasts here potentially, and I'd really love to.
We are in this world now. This is the world we are in right now. This is what it is like. I kind of like it. Yeah.
It's now we're talking about inclusion, which is awesome, because it's about tech developments. Quite often about interfacing, aren't they? And that sort of how do we interface with our even the difference between inputting through a keyboard and voice control, if you like. And I know that a lot of inclusion conversations in music quite often comes down to language, because music education can be often so focused on learning the right terms, but actually with software, when you're just intuitively working, you remove that need, right? I don't even need the word dynamic or texture. It's just an exploration, which is really amazing, that it's sort of leveling the playing field. Maybe
that's interesting you say that, because I often say to other teachers that a great thing to do is get the pupils to talk about music in their terminology and then use yours, and it's kind of like an exchange, so that you begin to use some of their expressions, how to describe music, and they will start to use yours, and just kind of they will see the link, the correlation between the language that you're using. But if it's dictated to them, it's not their understanding. Their word doesn't mean that. So I think encouraging young people to talk about their music is them to be involved. If they think something is banging, or it's I don't know, some loads of different expressions over the years, what something that's the way they describe it is either they've heard someone else describe it of their kind of from that music scene or online or whatever. So you've got to sort of tap into that, and then include everybody in the conversation, and then start to say, well, this guy, what do you think of this? And then you play them something that's maybe more traditional and say, is that like this? Does it sound like the words you described? Because I use this word to describe it. What do you think? Does that describe Stormzy, or does that describe Dua Lipa or whatever? And it's like this exchange of words. I think that's a good start for inclusion, regardless of the technology. You know, the technology is a vehicle of expression. That, as I said before, an electric piano is music technology, and I think it's often misconceived just because you may not understand how it works. Obviously, there's a learning curve to everything. There's a learning curve to an Apple phone. You know, I mean, there's a learning curve to a smart TV. But the children, young people of this day and age, it's just that's the world. You know, that's it.
Mm.
You know, I hope that's not too off topic.
No, no, this is great. This is supposed to be, a meandering conversation about tech, really.
Mm.
Um, a really interesting insights. There's lots of quotes that I can pull out there for social media. I'm particularly excited. Thank you very much, Simon. You've made my job really easy for afterwards. Um,
Yeah. I'm just a machine. You press stop and go, and sometimes it works. Sometimes,
sometimes it doesn't.
yeah,
But
it's like our Dyson vacuum cleaner is going through a similar phase.
let's let's talk about Ableton in the real world, because I like how our
Okay.
conversation is going in this sort of inclusion way, and also bridging the gap, if you like,
Yeah.
between what children are experiencing in their real musical lives
Yeah.
and music teachers in in cardigans, like I am currently coming along.
Cardigans are great. It's what's underneath that counts.
Exactly, thank you. But coming in with their preconceived ideas. So, um, Ableton Live is obviously used in this real world
Yeah.
way, which is another reason for talking to you, because it's okay. Well, how does this then fit in with education? But can you give us people a little insight into some of the things that you've been doing with, be it Rudimental, Chemical Brothers, all those people and teams, and what you sort of,
Right.
because
Okay.
essentially you teach the artists and the teachers, don't you? Which is quite a unique sort of thing.
Yeah. So yeah, my initial role um, for Ableton is kind of developed a little bit more now towards towards brand manager, which is kind of overseeing a lot of this now. But yeah, a lot of the work I've been doing is training and product specialist and training was my previous title. But there's so much more to it than that. But yeah, as you said, we work with educators and artists, and
Do you sort of
often,
see those people in the same sort of bracket? I'm quite intrigued
well,
by that.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I really think so, and I think you'd be quite surprised that the respect that artists have for teachers is really great, because they think it's amazing that I'm having a conversation with, like, say, someone from Rudimental, Locksmith, who's like sort of the main voice of Rudimental, and he really wants to give back to education. So we're going to have a chat with him. But it's yeah, the way that Ableton Live is used is kind of all over the world and all different scenarios, from kind of art installations that it comes into, like, interfacing. You mentioned the word interfacing before, but we've done things where we've had people make interactive art, where you will walk up to a piece of art and you press something or cover it or change where you stand, and it will be affecting the music interactive artwork. And Ableton Lives can be used for that, to be connected to sense. It's like a hub for other devices. It's used a lot in assistive technology. You will have heard of Drake Music. If you ever speak to them, Ableton Live is a core of what they do, because they have people um, who make assistive technology, like special buttons that press and things that adapt to sense, things that adapt to light. So it's used in that sense. And then in a sort of to facilitate performance. So, for example, like the big Stormzy show at Glastonbury, the last Glastonbury, Ableton Live was synchronizing backing tracks, things that were coming in, vocal cues. I work with. Have you heard of a band called Churches?
Yeah.
From Scotland, and they're great. And there's like three of them on stage. Well, there's actually four now. They've got a live drummer as well, and they'll use kind of the in-ear monitors, but they will have like the clips that I showed you before. The vocalist has a clip for timing cues, so like it might just go like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, then boom, something happens. She'll also get a pitch so that when you kind of just start singing, I mean, most singers have got great pitch and you sing a song every night and it's always the same. But when you're changing the arrangement of songs to adapt different festival shows, things can get pretty crazy, as well as the traveling and things like that. So any way to assist the performance, and if you start singing a cappella and then a whole lot of music just kicks in behind you, an incredible volume, you A, need to be able to hear yourself, and B, need to have a pitch reference, because it could be so loud on stage or it's quite off-putting. So it's used for things like that, you know, for kind of giving little references, and you've got ways of monitoring the performance. And it can also be used for lighting as well, like Coldplay use it for things like that, to run the whole show and have like little musical cues and timing. And it can also be used for instruments that you can't bring out on the road because they're so expensive. So you can get recordings of those that you can still put them across the keys and sample them, so it sounds the same to the audience, but you're not having to bring this, you know, classic 1960s organ that you want to keep in the studio, but you want to play the sounds out to people. So it facilitates live shows. And another example is Cirque du Soleil. They use it as well. And TV shows like X Factor, when there's a live show, they can put the audio cues, and you know, if someone's coming on stage, they don't know exactly going to come on, so they'll have samples and things that can be triggered in real time. So things like that, it just facilitates a lot of performance that most people wouldn't realize is happening, you know, very behind the scenes. But for the artists, it's like explaining to them, they haven't had the time to maybe learn, or have not had the opportunity to learn like I have. So I explain concepts of what they can do to enhance their performance, or to enable them to do something like we've mentioned already, you know. And for teachers, it's a lot of demystification, just like we're doing now. We're kind of explaining the potential of what you can do and finding the easiest way to get to that place. And you know, we do things like we help with work schemes and live sets, so that they're not having to start from scratch. We can help them with resources that have been developed by other teachers using the software as well. And so that kind of leads on to community aspects as well. So I'll leave it there.
That's great. Really interesting to hear the mix between the two, really, as artists and teachers, and artists and educators.
Yeah.
So is there always an element in the training, if you like, that you're giving, that it is based on opening doors rather than a prescribed? I don't know, I remember like IT lessons at
Oh,
school, and you know, we were using Microsoft Word, and
right.
you
I knew you
had
were
to
going to
do
say that.
something. It's just painful, wasn't it? And there
Yeah.
would be something projected up on the screen, you know, press Control C, and then you know, this really ridiculous, pointless. Actually, I'm going to go out and say that that was pretty pointless.
Yeah. Well,
So, how is it different from my IT lessons at school?
great training in general for teachers. Do you mean so?
Well,
How?
I mean, the sort of the work that you're doing with when you're training,
Okay.
when you're training someone from Chemical Brothers or from such and such primary school, where
Okay.
is how are you doing it? Are you doing it like my IT teacher was, or...
No, well, I'm just going to guess that I would just no, because yeah, similar. Yeah, the IT. So yeah, I think it's all about the needs, isn't it? You know, what the needs and the goals are, or where is the blockage, or where what's what is it that stops you? And I think most people, it's concepts. You know, the concept of this is possible. How do I do this? Or again,
Mm,
I use the word demystification. I use it a lot because that needs to happen. People don't necessarily understand what something does because they've either been tainted by somebody else who they respect and say, "Oh no, it's just for that." You know, Ableton Live's just for this and just for that. I mean, I go on those Facebook groups for case, key stage 3 Facebook groups, things like that, and it's just like it's teachers listen to each other and talk to each other. So I think demystifying, making it simple, making it clear what you can and can't do. For example, Ableton Live doesn't have any scoring features, and we're okay with that because there's other programs that do scoring very well,
mm,
and they don't do what Ableton Live does. So use them both. They're all tools to get to a goal, and so the training for me is like, what do you need? What's the most useful, and then explaining. But one thing is like confidence for teachers, because if you've been through Royal Northern College of Music and you're a great string player, you already know about music. You know what music fundamentals and the language. But I think there's so much to keep up with music as a it's a full-time job to keep up with what's happening in music. It's incredible what's happening. Like before you even move into a genre and then out of a genre and then in different regions in the world, there's so much amazing music happening and that has already happened. So no one can be a true expert. So I think finding what you need as the goal, and then demystification, and then just gaining confidence by, for example, when a student comes up to a teacher and says, "I want to make a grime beat or a drill beat," and then the teacher goes, "What is that?" I mean, you'd have to go on some pretty like YouTube journey that night to really understand what grime and grill, grime and drill music is, and it could just terrify a teacher. But it's like, well, the thing is, you've got to look at how they arrived at that and just go a few steps back. And just as I mentioned before, get the student to present why they like grime and get them to use their language. And you think, well, actually, that's come from like hip hop. I mean, hip hop is like 40 years old now. This is not like, this is it's a foundation of popular music. So like hip hop is not modern. I mean, there is modern hip hop, but I think, we had a conversation with a 11-year-old, and he thinks that Michael Jackson is classical music because that's old stuff. That's old music to them. And I think people forget this. They still think that Beatles is like modern on a
mm,
music exam. And it's like, no, it isn't. So, and then, so I think it's just to kind of, you're the music teacher, you understand the foundations of music. You've got to draw from what they're bringing to you. And again, like I said before about the language, is find a nice place for everybody to live in that. And it's a trade of skills. It's a trade of knowledge. And, you're not going to be an expert on grime because some of it is experienced by watching YouTube clips and things that get shared on social media. Allow them to explain, but draw what you know from that. Oh, it's got an offbeat every so many notes, or that the hi-hats are doing 30-second note trills, and it's like, did you say trill, mister? Yeah, them trilling hi-hats, and off you go. So it's kind of finding a common ground with the training. But yeah, it's demonstrating. Hands-on experience is great. We've had to do a lot of online stuff, but
that's really great, man. And a lot of our conversations with all different educators that we've had throughout these podcasts on different aspects of musical learning, be it different genres or whatever. And I think quite often the conclusion is, look, be confident in the fact that you don't necessarily know about this, and just
yeah,
be there to explore it with them. And your
yeah,
skills as a teacher is to sort of yeah, to present, almost present what they know back to them, really,
Yeah,
once you've
yeah,
learnt it. Um,
definitely.
Fantastic. Listen, I could keep talking forever and ever,
Yeah, me too,
but
man.
we have to stop, really.
Yeah.
Can we conclude with maybe you could just inform us a little bit about if a teacher wanted to learn more about Ableton Live or have access to, or what,
Yeah. Um,
where else? Further reading.
Further reading. So, can we put some links somewhere on
Yeah,
this?
definitely.
So, the first thing that I would say to anyone listening to this, regardless of what DAW experience you have or anything like that, is we've got a learning music website. And if we can put the link in, it's free and it works on anything that has got a browser. So, Chromebooks, iPads, everything else. And it's an online. You could put the link in there, but if I start showing you,
Is it learningmusic.ableton.com
that's right.
perchance? Is that
That's the
fantastic?
one.
So we'll find a place for a link, but just in case, learning.
So now, what that gives you an idea of is it's not aimed at any key stage or anything like that. It's for anyone to learn music theory combined with the technology idea of drawing beats and bass lines. Then it goes on to scales and harmony, and it handles song structure, and it uses some modern traditional examples. It's just a great resource. We've had a lot of really, really good feedback from teachers. It's technically still in beta. We're still working on these things, but it's a good resource, and you can learn so much from it. And there's like further reading from that is we have a learning synths, which is on the last page. You can find that, and that explains synthesis, and it sort of touches on a little bit more of the physics and the sound and how things are created. They are awesome, regardless of the fact that I work for them. I will say that they've had such good, strong feedback, and you can use it on any device, on mobile phones, computers, as long as it can have a browser. As well as that, there's a little bit of text in anywhere you create sounds on that website. You can export to live, and what that does is it creates a little file that you can then email to your teacher, or back home, or whatever you want to do with it, or open it on your computer if you're already on a computer, and you can open it in Ableton Live, and then you can record vocals to it. You can develop the idea further, and it's kind of like a nice introductory step, because the way that Ableton Live works is kind of made a little bit simpler in this learning music site. But you can also use it if you were in an IT suite in a school where you've not got access to any instruments. You can still talk about the fundamentals of rhythm, harmony, and you can use the keyboard to play some notes and things like that, as in the computer keyboard.
Hmm.
Just try it. Honestly, you'd be crazy not to try it. And then, with that in mind, if that was really interesting to some people, you can then, if you're teaching in primary and high school in the UK and Ireland, we can offer you a classroom worth of Ableton Live Intro, which is our first paid version. We can provide that free of charge for the classroom, and you just need to speak to me or click the link that we're going to put in this podcast, and that will take you. You can just apply for a free classrooms worth of Ableton Live Intro, and yeah, if you do that, and then also if there's any training needs, we can also look at the training. If you sign up for like our Ableton newsletter or anything like that, we can help you with training, and it's free as well. We don't charge for training, because it's, if you're going to use our products, let's show you how to get the most out of them. We're doing a lot of teacher focused webinars, so maybe I can share those with you, Chris, and then you can send any info about those.
Excellent. Thank you, Simon. That was a wonderful conversation. A pleasure. Thank
No,
you
thanks for
for
having me.
your knowledge.
Anytime. As long as you keep me on focus on the track, we'll be all right. So it's busy times, but yeah, interesting times. But yeah, there's a lot happening, but there's some good things. Good things happening. This is
Thanks so
good
much.
right now. This is good. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks.